p.m. I am Board President Jim Pedersen, and we will begin with a roll call. And Nate?
Nate Bryson, Board Member.
McKay Jensen, Board Member.
Keith Rutell, Superintendent.
Jim Pedersen, Board President.
Melanie Hall, Board Vice President.
Julie Rash, Board Member.
Jennifer Partridge, Board Member.
Stephanie Bryant, Business Administrator.
And I extend a warm welcome to all of you who are here from the community, as well as to those individuals who are members of superintendents, administrative staff. We appreciate you taking time out of your undoubtedly busy schedules to come and be with us this evening, and look forward to those who will share with us input later this evening. We will begin with some opening remarks by Board Member Julie Rash.
If I can get my reading glasses to stop fogging up. In this, interesting time that we find ourselves, as I've been kind of contemplating what I wanted to say tonight, I was reminded of a book I read a year or two ago, and I'm just going to share a few thoughts with you guys from that. Paul Woodruff wrote a book called First Democracy. And in that book, he unpacks and talks about the history and the concept of democracy by referring to the experiences of ancient Athens. You guys know that. In his book, he delineates several key characteristics necessary for real democracy to flourish. And if we remember our history, we know that Athens achieved a democratic state and flourished, and then they lost it. So we look at Athens as a good study for what we hope to not happen, I suppose. But I want to touch briefly on two pillars that Woodruff talked about in his book, and I promise it'll be brief. The first is the idea of reasoning without knowledge, or in other words, the ability to reason and to make decisions in a climate of uncertainty. And I think we can all agree a climate of uncertainty is exactly what we're facing right now. We heard it several times during our study meeting. We've talked about it lots. There's so much going on right now that we just don't have the answers to. Many of the decisions citizens and governing bodies are required to make are made as the future unfolds 3 or 5 or 10 steps in front of us. They're always open to refutation, and they're usually uncertain. We have to make decisions without knowing the full outcome. It's because some decisions are made in the absence of the knowledge we wish we had. The second, and perhaps more important pillar that Woodruff talked about, certainly one that is relevant to our ideological climate that we're in right now, is harmony. Mr. Woodruff states, quote, "Without harmony, and believe we should substitute civility here, there is no democracy. Harmony makes the state strong and at peace with itself. It prevents civil war. Without harmony, the people have no common interest. What could government for the people mean if people are so badly divided that there is nothing they want together? Without harmony, government rules in the interests of one group at the expense of another. If harmony fails, many people have no reason to take part in government or in the conversation. Others conclude that they must achieve their goals outside of the democratic process altogether." As decisions are made tonight and decisions continue to be made, I would encourage everybody, the board up here included, our administrative staff, and all the patrons in the district, to remember that we're all working and doing our best to make decisions on behalf of the students in our schools. We have some outstanding teachers, we have some very concerned parents, and I think we would all be well served to remember that. And that's the thought I want to leave you with. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. We will now have the Pledge of Allegiance, and we will be led by Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Education, Dr. Todd McKee.
If you'll please stand and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, Thank you.
Thank you, Todd. I will eventually figure out the microphone here. I'm aware that those who are watching on YouTube, that we need to make sure they are able to hear all that takes place. We will now proceed to item number 4, public input. And prior to that, I have a statement that I would like to read. Board meetings are conducted for the purposes of carrying on the business of the schools and therefore are not public meetings, but are meetings held in public. All meetings shall be open to the public except when those matters as prescribed by law are discussed. However, all actions taken by the board will be done in open meetings. Time to address the board is dedicated for suggestions to the board for improving district services, including suggestions regarding district policy. The district has developed procedures under separate policies to be followed in processing concerns specifically related to the following. 1, rights of individuals with disabilities. 2, concerns regarding learning materials. 3, cases of alleged sex discrimination. And 4, sexual harassment complaints. Persons with concerns in one of these 4 areas are encouraged to seek assistance from the superintendent's office in identifying appropriate procedures. The following guidelines shall govern the conduct of audience participation. 1, signups to address the board or on a first-come, first-served basis at the board meeting using the public input submission form. I've already referred to those, but if anyone has not, those forms are over to your left, my right. And if you have not filled one out, if you would please do so, and then give that to Bonnie, who is over here on my left, your right. Number 2, individuals wishing to be heard shall be asked to provide in writing their name, address, and issues to be discussed to the secretary of the board. That's Bonnie. Individuals wishing to be heard shall first be recognized by the president. Individuals wishing to address the board shall begin by stating their name and address. The board will then take no official action in response to public comment during the business meeting, but follow-up will be made if needed by the superintendent and the board at a later date. This information is excerpted from public input in board meetings in Policy 1430 approved on November 13th of 2012. I would remind those of you who are speaking that we will be allowing each individual 3 minutes to address the board. I would ask you that you please be very conscientious, and at the end of that 3 minutes, please end your comments. Even if you have additional things that you would like to say, would you please hold fast to that 3-minute rule, as that is our expectation for each individual. As we begin, we have a meeting at 8 p.m. this evening that we need to begin promptly at 8 p.m. And so we appreciate your assistance in helping us meet that time frame that we are working within. Before we begin our public comment, I would maybe like to take just a half a minute or 2 or 3 and express to you my appreciation for those of you who will address the board this evening. One of the things that I've always been impressed with about almost everyone in Provo is their willingness to be honest, open, forthright, polite, respectful, and in particular when providing commentary on items about which we may disagree, and we may disagree significantly. And so as you make your comments this evening, I invite you to be open and honest and forthright with the board, but to do so in a manner that is respectful and considerate of others who may have differing opinions. With that, we will begin, and I would first like to invite Amanda Kuhn, would you please come forward to address the board? I just kind of mixed these up a little bit, so you'll come when I call.
Okay, can you hear me okay?
Fine.
All right, so my name is Amanda Kuhn, and as you know, I have children this year that will be a
Your address, please?
Oh, my address is 205 East, 2950 North in Provo,
Thank you.
and my children go to Edgemont Elementary and Centennial Middle School. So I have a kindergartner, second grader, fifth grader, and eighth grader this year. And I wasn't expecting to speak. I certainly wasn't expecting to go first, and so this won't be as eloquent or as organized as others that you'll hear. I just listened to the full meeting. I don't know if you've noticed, I've been here since that meeting started, and I felt like I had things that I could say. First of all, I want to let you know that I feel like we're all on the same side, and I really appreciate all of the extra hours and all of the extra time that you are all putting into doing what you feel is best for the children. I don't think that this ever needs to be like a us against each other thing. So I am privileged to be a stay-at-home mother. I'm English speaking and I am educated myself. So I am one of your best case scenarios for at-home learning. After listening to today, I feel like I needed to share my experiences from this spring. I have 2 students with IEPs. Any help for them got lost in the amount of regular schoolwork that was sent home as their computer work. So any help that they needed as far as their reading or cognitive skills that they have problems with, none of that was addressed once we went to all online schooling. It just got lost in the regular work. Alex, I didn't get his last name, but Alex spoke of having the teachers put down participation points for their students. My 7th grader last year, who has an IEP, would completely be counted as having participation points. However, what happened with her was she would log on, she would look at an assignment, she wouldn't understand it, she would email her teacher and not hear back for a few days, right? And then it was hard for her to come back again to do her work again. Her grades plummeted without me realizing and without all of her teachers realizing because she was spending time on the computer. She was engaged with her teachers. She was trying to figure out the assignments, but she couldn't do it. And I just see that being a huge problem of online learning. I think these children need to be in school more. I think they need to go back to the regular 5-day school day because they won't get this type of thing at home. I'm going to keep going. I also, Todd McKee gave a bunch of statistics on COVID, and that's very frustrating because I wish that we had the same amount of statistics on the children who are being left home alone during this time, whose parents both have to work. That we had the same statistics on the children who aren't getting fed, the children who are being abused in their homes that aren't in safe situations. I wish that that was something that would also be taken into account. I think these children need to be in school. And that's all I'd like to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda. We next, maybe I'll give a disclaimer. If I mispronounce your name, I apologize from the bottom of my heart. I'll do the best I can. Ashley Gerstner.
Thank you. I'm Ashley Gershner. I live at 2932 Chippewa Way, Provo, Utah. And from what it sounds like, from what was discussed tonight, it sounds like a lot is out of your control due to the state guidelines. And I'm making this argument so we know we're on the same side and you can fight for us on the state level. And I'm here to help and help these children. Public schools should be open 5 days a week, full-time during the school year. This is 100% about the boys and girls. The full-time option to be in school should be available no matter the risk. We need to look at the big picture. What are the effects of not being in school for 18 months? And this is assuming we go back full-time in the fall of 2021. We know that education is the best way to escape poverty, and we must not limit that opportunity. So I ask my question again. What effect will limited classroom and learning opportunities have on our children? There are many unknowns about this virus, and we don't have all the facts and data. we do have all the facts and data of what happens to our children if they don't attend school versus if they do. And why are we willing to take a known risk versus an unknown risk with a 0.04 mortality rate for people under 70, which is the population we're discussing? And I keep hearing what about the teachers, and I want to clarify, I love the teachers. I am a teacher. I support teachers through volunteer hours, providing supplies and helping any way I can. I am a resource and advocate for teachers, but this isn't about the teachers, this is about the children. And I think it was discussed here tonight, one of the reasons we're not going back full-time is because college students will be returning to our city from around the world. And I don't feel it should make a difference who is coming to our city. And BYU doesn't start until August 31st. And if we're waiting for the 2 weeks to see what happens after that date, we will have already been in our Provo schools for 10% of the academic year and have only attended 7 half-days in person. Restricting school doesn't restrict our interactions. We don't live in a vacuum or bubble. It doesn't matter whether we leave our house to go to school or leave our house to go to Costco. I just don't see the difference. So let's be in school 5 days a week. The parents now have a choice to homeschool if they feel the risk is too big. Let us support one another in that choice of distance versus traditional learning. Let us assess the risk and do what we feel is right for our children and not take away what others feel is right for theirs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashley. Next, we'll invite Annie Grohl.
Thank you for letting me think. My address is 4435 North Canyon Road in Provo. This is my first meeting I've ever attended, and it was extremely informative with how many considerations you guys have to make in order to make these decisions. And it was very confusing as a parent to hear and look up the previous board meeting agendas and see that it was 5 days a week is our #1 goal on July 3rd, and 5 days a week was our #1 goal on July 15th. And then to hear that we're actually doing this hybrid program, and it was hard to understand why. And after listening to you, I do see that there are a lot of things you have to consider, and I think you're trying to be really thoughtful about it. And I think that one of the biggest things, like board member Bryson said, we're toast with that 10% or the 15 students. And if you look at that, I think you said there are 2,200 kids at Timpview, so that's 0.6% is 15 students. So we're asking the risk to be essentially 0 in order to have our kids be in school. And I think that seems kind of inevitable or impossible to achieve. And if teachers are worried about contracting coronavirus, and if we are seeing that children are not dying from coronavirus, nor are they really spreading it according to the AAP, they're not really spreading it and they're not really getting it, and that we are making a lot of decisions regarding schools based on the spread of influenza to children. Anyway, I think that the point I'm trying to make is that we do need to prioritize the kids who are most at risk, and studies show that kindergarten through 3rd grade is the biggest determining factor for their success in school. If you don't learn to read by the 4th grade, 75% of those people who don't learn to read will not learn how to read by the time they graduate high school. And so I would ask that if schools are shut down because this infection rate reaches the mandate level provided by the state, that maybe we would consider the alternative of turning our junior highs and our high schools into elementary schools so that we can take care in a perfectly distant space, not spreading germs, to make sure that the kids who are most vulnerable, that they have an education 5 days a week from a professional, because I am trying to teach my kindergartner and my third grader. I have a master's degree, and I don't know, my kindergartner and first grader, and I don't know how to do it. And we do need these kids in schools with professional teachers, and there are more options to get that done.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Annie. Next, I invite Adriana Reeve to come forward.
Hello. My name is Adriana Reeve, and I live at 210 East, 2950 North. It's good to see you all again. I've been here before in front of you, and I did want to thank you for doing what you do. It was good to be here and to listen to how much you care about our district, and I want you to know that first off. We all know that the situation is very complicated, but today I am going to represent the children, their present and future selves, who cannot talk for themselves. I'm a Provo mom. I've been involved in the PTA at Provo Peaks for 3 years and was the president for 1.5 years. I also have taught English at Provo Peaks as a volunteer to help the international refugee families at the school. I've worked firsthand with many different types of families in the district. When the lockdown occurred, many of these families had a really hard time helping their children continue to learn. Both single parents and two-parent homes worked full-time and weren't able to help their children learn. And some were not even able to be home with their children, leaving their children home alone. And what about the parent who cannot even speak English to help their child with their homework? From the Provo Parent Survey, compared to traditional learning, teachers said that 62 to 67% of students did less with remote learning than traditional learning. This is only one of the many negative consequences that come from children not being in school. Even if it is just a day or a few hours, children turn to the internet. Their learning decreases, domestic violence increases. Recently, I discovered that since the lockdown, sex trafficking and pornography has gone up by 500%. We have many, many families who are single parents or parents that both need to work. We have thought much about the present COVID circumstances, but what about thinking of the future of our children? The survey Provo parents took showed that 10% of parents want all remote learning, and the district is giving them that. 26% of parents wanted hybrid learning, and the district is giving them that. 20% of parents wanted half-day learning, and the district is giving them that. 42% of the parents wanted school as normal, but the district is not accommodating these families. 42%. That is a big number. Are we doing what is best for everyone? Our job as educators is to do what parents would like to be done with their children. COVID is not going away. We live in a mortal world. We are going to get sick, and we cannot control a disease. And as much as we try, we also cannot control people and the choices that they make. Research has shown that the majority of people recover from COVID. How long will we put our children's education and lives at risk for a sickness that the majority recover from, especially children? We always hear about a death caused by COVID. But how often do we hear about a child that falls into sex trafficking, a child that never learns to read, or a child that is abused by a caregiver at home? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Adriana. Brett Bolton, would you please come forward?
Brett Bolton, 2900 Chippewa Way. So first off, 95% of the things that I wanted to say have already been articulately shared by those who came before me. I have the opportunity to work with a lot of people that are lower socioeconomic families where English is a second language for them. These children barely make it under the best of circumstances, just because it's just simply difficult under those circumstances. And so I'm not a trained educational person. I don't pretend to be an expert. I don't pretend that these are simple issues, but I can tell you that these kids will not make it. These kids who are just barely making it, this program will not work for them. And I have had a fabulous experience with public education in this city. We love our teachers. We feel like without exception, we've had fabulous teachers. And I know that Your job is not an easy job. And it's complicated, and you have people you have to answer to. You have to work with the state. There's guidelines. But what I expect from my public servants, from my leaders, is I expect them to be willing to show courage and optimism, because that's what it requires to make hard decisions. And so that's my expectation, is that I'm not saying these decisions are simple and there's a silver bullet to them, but my expectation is that each one of you and each of our state leaders and all of the people who are to make these decisions, you need to put the children first, and it's not improper to ask for sacrifice in a society on behalf of children. It's not immoral to say to a teacher, listen, this is a little scary, we need to accommodate you, but we're asking that you make sacrifice and that you show courage and that you show optimism, because that, if you make that the basis for how you lead in government and how you serve, you're going to make better decisions. If you work from a position of fear and of worst case scenarios, it's not my family that's going to get chewed up by this thing. You know, I have the ability to, if I choose to send my kids to private school 5 days a week, and that's something I've never considered before now. But I'm telling you right now that if this board and if our state and local leaders do not act with courage and with optimism, irreparable harm will be done to these kids. And all the data shows that the risk of infection and all of that, that's all established to some degree. We know the outcome is going to be bad for a lot of these kids. So that's my request, that this board sincerely search each one of your souls and advocate on behalf of these kids. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would Clay DeGraff come forward?
Clay DeGraff, 2767 Arapahoe, and I try to articulate with a piece of underwear on my face. I'd like to ask first to consider the science. The CDC says to open. A study dropped yesterday from the UK from 100 institutions said hardly any transmissions. A study also from Ireland and from the UK, 0 transmissions from school. So I'm at a loss of words to understand why we're not going back. I'm at a loss of words to hear things reverberate through community that says, oh, they're getting some pushback from the teachers union. And I say, who do you work for? Do you work for us, or do you work for the teachers union? That's, I think, something that you need to explain to each and every one of us. Because the teachers union is a very powerful, in some ways that I'm seeing right now, harmful organization. And that might be on the edge or on the fringe, but that's how I feel, and that's how a fair amount in our community feel. Probably that 42% that are suggesting that we should open for 5 days. I still understand that. How there's a majority of 42%, but that's not considered. We consider the minority, so it's minority rule, not majority rule. So I'm confused. I would like to ask some questions, but I can't. So I'm confused at the decision that you came up with, because, and I got a minute to do this. I have 6 kids. I have 3 in Centennial, or 3 in Timpview. Those 3 had so much homework piled on them for the last 3 months that I cannot believe how much stuff they were doing. They weren't conversing one iota with their teacher. They were trying to get a hold of their teacher. There was no conversing with their teacher. Their homework was turned in, and then their homework wasn't graded for weeks on end. Now, I'm not the only one that's seen this. I've talked to many, many parents that have said the same thing. So what are the teachers doing then, is what I want to know during the lockdown. They're not Zooming with my kids. All they're doing is throwing homework out there. They're not that's not teaching. That's not teaching in any specter of the word. I can do that. And then they're not grading their papers right away, and we're not seeing an update in Power School at all. So I would like those questions answered. And thanks for your time.
Thank you very much, Clay. And the last item, the last form I have is for Brayley Danielson.
You should know, that's the second time today someone's got my name wrong in a public forum. It's Bailey Danielson. And
Oh, I'm
last
sorry,
time
I'm
I was
sorry,
called
Bailey.
Bailey Cunningham, so I
Let's
appreciate
call
that.
her Bailey
I need to
Cunningham.
go back to school
So
again and read.
let me
I
just
need my
clarify,
glasses
it's
changed.
Bailey like a dog you might have had growing up, and Danielson like the kid on The Good Karate Kid. Okay, glad we're there. So I live at 24 East, 400 North. I am a teacher, and I also am a parent of a child at Franklin. I also happen to be the president of our local union, so if there's anybody who has questions and would like to talk to me, I would love to speak to you. I also want to say I am so grateful and honored to see how Provo is reacting, because even with opposing opinions coming to light, my 6th grade drama teacher taught us a word, decorum. And I have watched multiple school board meetings from across the state and seen a lot of different decorum being the behavior of the people. And I am so grateful to see so many parents who are putting the kids first and who are here representing them. So thank you to all of you, even those of you who aren't speaking, for being here on behalf of the students. All right, I have 2 minutes left. I want to say that I do receive a lot of emails, and I want to say too, I'm separate from the state teachers union. I represent the Provo teachers. And from July 3rd until your last school board meeting, I heard from 143 teachers, all expressing concern about students and health, and none of them were talking about themselves. They were talking about the health of students, the people who were living in the homes of students, and things like that. I also think it's interesting because listening to everyone tonight, most of the things that are said could be for either side. And it's just so interesting how we really are on the same side. We want to help teachers, and we want to help students. And I should have switched that, because as someone who became a teacher because of a boy that I taught when I was growing up, not wanting to be a teacher and becoming a teacher because of him, I put students first, and I know that the teachers are here for the students too. And I am so appreciative that there are options and that you're taking all those things into consideration. So thank you for being willing to be courageous and to make those hard decisions. I also teach at a very low demographic school. I'm also a single mother, and I also have a child who would be so much easier to go to school full-time. But I recognize that there are a lot of things that I have to do personally in order to help ensure health and safety for multiple people. And that is talking about their emotional well-being, their social well-being, all of those different things as well. The thing is that I spoke this morning a little bit about the pandemic that happened in 1918, and students didn't go to school for 2 years. Those students also lived through World War I, and we have seen what happened with that generation. So we can hope that this generation can become as great as that one, even when we have to make these hard decisions. Thank you.
Thank you, Bailey. Thank you to all of those who took time to address the board this evening. We appreciate your comments, and I would like you to know that we will certainly look at them and consider them very carefully as we move forward. Bailey, it was probably the fact that I got up at 4 a.m. this morning. Okay. Thank you. We will now move into the business items of our meeting this evening. Item A was policy 3420, COVID-19 face covering requirements and exceptions. Is there a motion to approve this policy?
Jim, I move we approve new policy 3420, COVID-19 face covering requirements and exceptions.
Motion by Board Member Jensen. Is there a second?
I second it.
seconded by Board Member Bryson. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Just a reminder that this policy is following guidelines as given by the state and the Board of Health. Seeing no further discussion, all in favor, please indicate with aye. Aye. Any opposed with nay? The motion appears to pass unanimously. Item B, large donation. Stephanie, would you or Chad just quickly highlight that for us?
Okay, this is a donation that exceeds $50,000, therefore it needs the board's approval. As we discussed in study session, it's for 20 75-inch screen monitors to be placed out in various schools where some of our audiovisuals needing replacement.
Thank you, and it's marvelous that there are those who are willing to step forward and help us in this way. Is there a motion to approve the large donation?
I move we approve the donation from Galaxy Next Generation for large monitors valued at $51,000.
Motion by Board Member Nielsen. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Board Member Hall. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor of approving the motion? Yay?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Nay? The motion passes unanimously. Item C, approval of the purchase of instructional programs for middle school math courses. Is there a motion to approve?
I move we approve the purchase of the Go Math instructional program for middle school math courses in the amount of $81,456.83.
Motion by Board Member Partridge. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Board Member Rash. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Is Anne Marie still with us? Anything you wanted to say about this, Anne Marie, before we vote? All in favor? Aye. Any opposed?
Nay. The motion's assumed, right?
The motion is, I did
Yeah.
motion and second that, yes. It was,
Great.
there was a second. Julie seconded.
She's looking at the wrong.
looking at the
yeah.
wrong motion. I apologize.
Yeah.
Okay, so one more time. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed, nay? The motion passes unanimously. We haven't been here long enough yet. Okay. Motion to approve changes to the professional development model and calendar days. Is there a motion to approve?
I move we approve the change to the professional development model as follows, with first a change to the student calendar to make previously scheduled professional development days regular instruction days, and second, doing blended learning focused professional development training once a month on a Friday.
Motion by Board Member Partridge. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Board Member Hall. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
Yeah,
Yes.
clarification here. I don't see the change to the 24th, the first day. We were going to discuss that a bit. Is that correct?
I
Okay.
see that as being a separate item that we would vote on.
Yeah. Is that a separate, is it listed on the agenda? The separate?
We felt not to bring that forward as a motion item, but of course, the board can amend the motion to include that if you choose.
So this is just without that bit.
Yes.
And I guess I would like to speak with that. I mean, we want to, evidence gives me, there's no doubt that we're trying to support our teachers as we go into this thing into this next school year. But this next school year, we have two concerns. One is a curricular concern, and one is how do we take care of the students. I know, at least for me, and part of the change of the schedule was giving the teachers time to learn how the protocols of when they're going to wipe down the seats, how to get the staggered recess scheduled, how to handle class changes. And I thought that we were going to do that sort of together, sort of community and teachers together. That the students and the teachers were going to learn together, and then have a Friday in between that first pancake, and then start again. And so I was always under the assumption that that first week, that first Wednesday, Thursday, was about just figuring it out, because it's going to be difficult, so that we can get to the curriculum. And in that way, I think it's more valuable to have the students in the building. I think that we've got to find out about our students, the people that haven't communicated with us. And we've got to be calm. And I understand that it's not going to look like the first day of school in any other year, because it's not any other year. But I rather than delay even 3 days, I would like to proceed on with our schedule.
Would you like to make that as
Well,
an
it's
official?
not necessary because it's not in the motion, so we can approve this motion, but I guess I'm preempting any amendment to the motion.
I'll agree with you on that, McKay.
We okay with that?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
We okay with the motion and the second? Ready to move forward? Then all in favor of the motion indicate aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. And McKay, make sure we
Yes,
follow through.
and Bailey, please communicate with the teachers that we want to be flexible. And one of the hardest things that we're dealing with right now is sort of expectations. Expectations even from the teachers, that we're trying to exhibit care first and move through. And so that we're not trying to deny the teachers the time, and I know that there's some anxiety, but there's some anxiety certainly from the public as well. And we need to start so that we can get to full day as soon as possible. We can get these skills. We can do these things. We can accomplish everything that we need to.
And if I may, I am also looking forward to my daughter starting school on the 19th.
Okay, thank you very much, Board. And thank you, Board Member Jensen. The consent calendar. The consent calendar consists of our previous board meeting minutes from July 14th as well as July 30th. Any personnel items we discussed, as well as homeschool, school choice, e-school reports, and financial reports that were part of our previous meeting. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I move we approve the consent calendar.
Motion by Board Member Hall. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Board Member Rash. Is there any additional discussion on the consent calendar? Seeing none, all in favor of approval of the consent calendar, please indicate aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The motion passes unanimously. We will now be pleased to have a board member report from Board Member Rebecca Nielsen.
Thank you. Tonight, for my board member report, I am going to report on something unrelated to COVID, to give everyone just a little break. This year on August 22nd, some of you may have heard us talk about this a little bit in the business meeting, but I'll be attending the delegate assembly. And I thought I'd report a little bit on what that means and what the process is there. So this will be my third delegate assembly since I started my term here. And basically what happens there is delegates from different regions across the state and different school boards across the state come together, and we decide on what our legislative priorities will be that we will give to the legislators for the upcoming session to let them know what we want for our schools and what we hope that they will discuss and hopefully pass for us. We go and we spend a whole morning, sometimes into an afternoon. We debate, we discuss, we vote, and we come up with our list of priorities. And it's a really fabulous process. I really enjoy going and doing that. But the interesting thing about the delegate assembly is that it's actually one small part of the whole process. So really, the process for the delegate assembly starts in the fall, almost a full year before, or excuse me, over a year before it actually makes it to the legislators. There's regional meetings held with local school boards where they start looking for ideas of things they want to ask the legislature for. And they gather ideas, they gather input from the school boards. And once they get that, the JLC, which stands for the Joint Legislative Committee, they meet once a month, continuing to put together those ideas, following current legislation, finalizing ideas, et cetera. And then finally, by June and July, they get those ideas ready and prepared to present to the delegate assembly. And then once we vote on those at the assembly, then they go off to the legislature in the January session, and all that work, over a year's worth of work, we hope comes to fruition. So the reason I wanted to outline that process for you is, one, because I like reporting on something that I enjoy, and I really enjoy the delegate assembly. It's a really great day and a really great place to be to learn about how the legislature works and what we can do to influence their decisions for education, for positively. But I also wanted you to understand the time and the energy that goes into that process, because there's something that I've learned very clearly since being on the board. This is my 4th year of my first term here. And that is a saying that I say to myself all the time, that I hear all the time, but it is trust the process. And I'm speaking for myself, but I would guess the board members would agree. If you watch what happens in our meetings, in our discussions, in our committees, everything happens with a process. Sometimes it takes over a year, like I just described. Sometimes that process is very short. But I've watched the process work in everything that we've done here as a board and in our school district. Sometimes I'm directly involved in the process. For example, I was asked to sit on a committee to choose a kindergarten reading curriculum, and it took several months to process and to research and to decide what was going to be best for the kindergartners. And we took input from teachers, from community members, from all over the place, and put it all together, and we were able to use the process to come up with the best possible solution for our kindergartners and for their reading program. Sometimes as a board member, my job is not to be directly involved in that process, but instead to listen and be advised by those who are related or directly related to the process. And that's when, I'm not an expert on architectural things or engineering things or whatnot, and so we listen to those people who have gone through the process, and then we question them appropriately, and then we make our decisions based on their expertise. And so it's been a really interesting thing to be on the board and to watch this happen over the course of my years here, that when we engage in the process, as we should, gathering input from everyone as we should, we usually get to a really great solution. Now, I recognize that sometimes the outcome of the process is not what everybody loves. I have many times not loved the outcome, even though I have voted for it. And that may sound interesting and confusing. But what happens is I have my personal preferences, but as I go through the process and I watch it happen, I start to understand how my personal preference may not be the best choice for every child in the district. And so I just wanted to share that with you as I'm going into this process again for the 3rd time of going to the delegate assembly, and we'll go and we'll debate and we'll question and we'll do what we can to come up with the best. Typically, we come up with really great solutions. And so I'm going over this to help everyone understand that even though you may not like the outcome, I can assure you that the process has been followed, and that in doing so, we're doing our very best to come up with the best that we can. So with that being said, I wanted to let you all know that I know sometimes you may feel left out of the process, and we want our public to be involved. So if you feel like you don't understand what the process was or why certain decisions were made, we would love, well, I will speak for myself. I would love as a board member to help you with that process. I would guess you can contact any of the board members, and they would probably feel the same way. And we would love to let you know how you can be more involved in the process. There's lots of things to read. Trust me, I spend hours reading things prior to these meetings. There's lots of ways to be involved in committees, and there's lots of things you can do to be involved in the process with us so you can see how it works and understand how and why we come to the decisions that we do. And so, if you're interested in the outcome of the delegate assembly, I would be happy to let you know. Feel free to contact me after August 22nd, and I'll be happy to report. And my plea after saying all that with everyone who's here tonight and those who have talked with us and maybe those who disagree or agree is to be involved with us in this process so that we can do this together. And that's my report.
Thank you, Board Member Nielsen. Superintendent, your report.
Thank you. I have just a couple of quick things to say. One is normally in this section of the meeting, I report on student travel that I have approved per policy. I have not approved any student travel right now. I want to report what we're doing that's a little different. I have for example, I have a tennis team request that's before me. I've given them conditional approval if they do have in writing a statement from the tournament sponsor, which is in state, not out of state, but in state, and they need to get that to me, and then I need an updated version of that within 5 days of the event again to make sure that it is still on the conditions have not changed. I mentioned this morning in my address to the district that our big concern right now is the safety of our students and our teachers, and this is one of the reasons why I've added this extra hoop for coaches and club sponsors to jump through, because we have to make sure that when they make a decision to go, I want to be sure that people do not come after me for having not been thorough enough. So I fully expect that the process won't be a lot different in terms of the number of approvals, but at least in terms of sifting through the information, we'll be just that much more careful. And the only other thing I wish to say is, Mark Wheeler, would you wave your hand, please? Mark is over facilities and grounds and construction. Mark was over here for those of you who didn't see him. Mark helps to co-lead the custodians and our facilities and maintenance staff, and our schools are looking great. They're clean. They're wonderfully clean. They've possibly never been cleaner. And just the amount of work that's gone on over the last little while, I just want to do a public shout out to Mark and Jeff Hawkins and others on that staff for having accomplished this over the last little while. That's my report.
Thank you, Superintendent. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Before we adjourn, I just wanted to make one comment.
Quickly.
Speaking about
We're
process.
pushing up against that 8 o'clock.
I understand. I misunderstood the process and thought we were going to be voting on the indicators for phase change document. And so I just wanted to say publicly that I did have some concerns still about that, and I will be reaching out to district staff about that and working through that with them.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned. You got about a minute and a half.
You all spend weeks at a time in LA.
And we didn't see any of our special friends from our emails. Mhm. Yeah. There's room for more public input on this hearing, right? Should we tell people to get forms? Oh, you went out and told them? Cool. Okay, perfect. In the purple? Oh, interesting. Okay. Well, I told my husband I was going to be back till like 11 tonight. Just expecting. Yeah, just expecting, you know. Yeah, yeah. Just. Yeah, I think it is. It looks like maybe plastic you would, but it can't. Understand why you're like, we will approve the tax rate. I'm sure you can, yes, I'm sure you can make comments.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the public hearing for the Provo City School District Board of Education. It is Tuesday, August 11th, 2020, at 8:05 p.m. We will begin with a roll call. Board Member Bryson.
Nate Bryson, board member.
McKay Jensen, board member.
Rebecca Nielsen, board member.
Keith Ruttel, superintendent.
Jim Pedersen, Board President.
Melanie Hall, Board Vice President. Julie Rash, Board Member.
Jennifer Partridge, board member.
Stephanie Bryant, business administrator.
We are convened for a budget hearing for a proposed tax increase. And Stephanie, I will turn the time over to you.
Okay, let me know if this mic doesn't work for me, since I'm short and I have to lean over. I think somebody said that earlier. Okay. We are here for a tax hearing, a public hearing for a tax increase. Just a little bit of background on that. State code actually requires the board to set tax rates year after year. Generally, it does not require a public hearing unless the board intends to increase those tax rates. We are looking at increasing one tax rate this year out of the 6 levies that the board has. So I will go through a short presentation with a little bit of background on property taxes in Utah, where our tax rate sits, how we compare to neighbors, what we'll be using that tax rate increase for. And at that point, by law, we have an open public input where people can come up and voice their opinions about the tax increase, good, bad, or otherwise. And then after that, you will vote on adopting a resolution, and you will vote on approving the tax rate as well as the FY21 final budget. So, okay. So as background, and I think most of our board is probably aware of this, but as background mostly for the people in the room who are here to hear. Utah Code gives school boards the authority to in order to educate our students. It's a small portion of our revenue. We get revenue from local taxes in the form of property taxes. We get revenue from the state. The bulk of that is called the weighted pupil unit. And we get revenue from federal, which is actually one of our smallest parts of our federal, of our revenue every year. The board has 6 levies. The board local, the voted, the capital, the debt. Then there's a charter school replacement and the state basic rate. Those last 2 bullets, the board does not set. The state basic rate is set every year by legislation. Right now it's being held at a floor of 0016, I believe. Charter school replacement is based on how many of our boundary kids attend charter schools. So that fluctuates every year based on enrollment. We collect that tax and then we remit it via the state out to those charter schools. The other 4 are actually set by our board. The debt one is pretty straightforward. It is based on whatever debt we have. The only time that that debt levy is increased is when there's a bond that's passed and authorized. It does decrease year after year based on assessments, and it decreases based on our principal payments that drop off each year. The capital levy is also one that the board can increase. That is restricted for capital needs, thus the name, capital levy. So for tonight, we are not looking at the capital levy because we are not looking to increase anything for capital needs. The last 2 are voted and board local, and those are generally 2 rates that we can use for operations. So in this instance, going out for a proposed rate this year, we're going to be focusing on board local. And it's really hard to turn pages when you don't have your fingers to do it with. Just a little bit of history on those 3 rates, the board local, the capital, and the voted. If you can see from this chart, over to the left, we have the proposed 2020 rate. And then after that, we go successfully down 10 years in our rates. And you can see a couple of spikes, especially back in 2012, when the board local levy went up. That was a year where we actually shifted between levies. The board is allowed to manage a couple of those levies simply by shifting between their uses. And as long as it doesn't increase the total rate, they don't have to come through truth and taxation. So you can see that spike in the board local in 2012 was offset by a decrease in the capital local levy. After that, you can see it's fairly flat. It went down a little for a few years. In 2016 and in 2018, you'll see a small jump. Those were the last 2 years that we did truth and taxations. And then 2019, it drops off again as assessments go up. And proposed 2020, you can see the board local will go up while the other 2 rates will continue to drop off. And I'll explain the drop in just a moment when I talk about assessments. This is just a comparison of districts across the state. These are 2019 rates. 2020 rates are not all 100% set yet, as a lot of school districts are doing exactly what we're doing tonight. So keep in mind that I'm comparing a proposed 2020 rate on this chart to 2019 rates at other districts. And you can see there's a state average there in the middle. Just above that state average is Alpine School District, one of our neighbors. And just a little bit above that is Provo, where we sit right now. And then with the proposed tax increase, we will jump up a little bit, again, basing a 2020 rate for us against 2019 rates. And then we always show our other neighboring district, Nebo, just as a reference so that you can see where we sit. So we're kind of in between our 2 neighboring districts, and we are a little bit above state average. When you're discussing the tax rates at districts, one of the things that you have to keep in mind is assessed values. Provo's assessed tax value is relatively low given our size, and a lot of that's because we have a lot of property that is non-taxable. BYU is non-taxable, majority of the hospital is non-taxable, there's a lot of other non-taxable entities here. So Our tax base that we actually collect taxes on is fairly low, which is part of the reason our rate's a little bit higher than some others. You can see Alpine on this graph has an extremely high taxable rate. A large part of the reason why large taxable assessed value, which is a large part of the reason why their rate is down here in the average. I always pick on Park City on this one, but Park City also has an extremely high taxable rate, or assessed value, and that's why their rates can be low too. So when you're talking about rates and comparing rates between districts, you also have to take into account the assessed values and the entire picture. So that's just a little bit of comparative background. These are our rates by our levy. I've shown the tax year 2019. I've also shown what tax year 2020 would be like if the board does not do a proposed tax increase. And then I've shown the 2020 proposal. The rate that we are looking at increasing is the board local levy. I've highlighted it in orange. And if you take a look at this, you see the other rates, such as the voted local and the capital, are actually dropping off based on 19 to 20. And that's because assessed values have gone up. As assessed values increase in the city, the rates actually drop. And the reason for that is they set it so that we as a school district get the same amount of revenue out of the system. So if your values go up, our rates drop, we get the same amount of revenue. By having a tax rate increase, that will increase the amount of revenue that our school district will actually get. So you can see on this chart, you can see without the proposal, this rate would actually drop very minimally, but it would drop. With the proposal, it's going to go up just a little bit. And then the chart below just shows those different rates comparatively from those three scenarios for you to see. I already kind of talked about this, but the assessed value, the county actually goes out and assesses your homes and businesses. We have no control over assessments. That's all done by the county. And what generally happens there is some homes may be assessed and they may have a 10% increase. Other homes may be assessed and only have a 3% increase. In bad years like 2007 and 8, we saw decreases. Our portion of that at the district is actually based on an average. So while somebody's home may be increased by 10%, we may only be seeing a 5% increase in the assessed value overall that our revenue is calculated on. So at times, people will look at their tax rate notices from the county and say, well, I'm really getting a 12% increase in my taxes. Part of that's from their assessed value versus a piece of it that would be from our rates. And again, you can see here, just showing this is our assessed value in 2019, 2020. This is the rate that we would be setting if we weren't going through truth and taxation process for the board local levy. This is the rate that we're proposing we set. And that is going to give us about a 10% increase in the district's revenue. That is just our local revenue. That doesn't include state or federal. So our budget is not increasing 10% overall. Our budget's actually increasing about maybe 2%. Okay. I'll start with residential and then I'll move to business. The public notice on the left basically gives you an idea of how the $90 increase that was in the public notice is calculated. The public notice is required to show our proposed rate against whatever that neutral rate for this year would have been. And then the one on the right shows what the proposed rate is versus what somebody would have paid last year. So the public notice says if the school board does not change and increase the rate, somebody with a $316,000 home, which is the average in Utah County, would pay $1,184. Because the board is increasing a rate, they're going to pay $1,275, which is a $90 increase. But if you compare it to your prior year's notice, you'll see that you were paying $1,239, you're now going to pay the same $1,275, and over the prior year, you're only seeing a $36 increase, which is less than 3%. The same thing with a business. However, business does not get the 45% exemption. So on a home, 45% of your home is not taxed. They give you a residential exemption on your primary residence. On a business, it operates the same. The public notice shows a $165 increase, which, if we were going from a neutral to a proposed, would be the total increase. But if you compare it to your last year's property tax notice, it's a bit smaller at $65, which is, again, just under 3%. So the biggest question that a lot of people, well, I shouldn't say a lot, but a few people have asked along the way in preparing for tonight's meeting is, what is this going to be used for? This tax increase is 100% going to be used for teacher salaries. There will be no increase for administrators for this money. There will be no increase for our support professionals from this money. It is only going to teachers. And I'll let Jason speak to that in just a moment. There was a process. Rebecca was talking about processes. We went through a process. We've been going through a process for a couple years with teachers, looking at where our salaries are at, comparing them to our competitors, next neighboring competitors. You know, starting salaries has been the buzz, at least until COVID happened. It was the buzz in public ed. So we've been looking at where our starting salary is at compared to other districts, on and on. So we're playing a little bit of catch up to get caught up with some other districts, and keep our quality teachers in our classrooms and hope they don't leave to go get better salaries elsewhere. The entire package we have for them this year is actually $5 million. So we did take a look at our budgets and find some money to cover that out of our existing budgets. But we are asking the taxpayers for an increase to cover $3.5 million of that $5 million. Jason, I'm going to let you, if you don't mind, speak to the process with the Salary Study Committee.
Thanks, Steph, for this opportunity to discuss the salary committee. So this time last year, we heard from some of our teachers after we'd gone through the negotiation process. And at the time we'd closed our negotiations, things were sitting in a positive as far as our relationships, our feelings about where we were with our salaries. But between there and the time that other districts announced and we got to our board meeting, we realized that we had some work to do. We were behind. So this last year, we formed a committee with the association here in our school district, invited teachers to join us. School board members were helping us with that committee also, our salary study committee. What we did in that process is to pull salaries from throughout the state. We have, you know, the salaries from both of our neighboring districts, but we often then go look at districts that are more our size, as far as a city district like ours. And we did some comparison, and with the comparisons, Stephanie put it well, we were behind in many measures. We were behind in our starting salary, we were behind in the increment that people received in a raise annually, and we were behind in the ending place of where someone would be finishing their career. So through the work that we did this year to address those different areas, we see our starting salary moves to $45,000. I'm sure many of you have heard that there are districts in Salt Lake that are sitting at $50,000 with their starting salaries. Again, we understand there's a difference there. We want to be competitive with districts that are our size and also be working to attract and retain the best teachers we can in our organization. So that was the process we went through. We had a great working relationship throughout the process with our association. They're very grateful for the work that you're willing to do to consider this increase, knowing that, you know, our taxpayers are helping us to make this increase for our teachers. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. There are some state property tax exemptions that are available, and I've set some copies of Publication 36 over on the table. They generally are for military and low-income families, but it does provide some property tax relief for those that might need it. We like to make sure people are aware of that. The second part of this public hearing is also looking at our budgets, because normally our budgets are set in June. By statute, they're set by June 22nd unless you are raising taxes, in which it changes to August. And the reason for that is because we can't set our budgets until we know that that revenue is going to be there. So in May, one of my staff members, Joe, showed the board the entire budget summary that was proposed. In June, the board tentatively approved that, so we would have an operating budget in July and August. And we are also tonight asking for final approval of that budget. Just as an FYI, a few things have been updated to that budget since May. Mostly things that we were not aware of in May that we were waiting for information on. Legislature had not settled on what our funding was going to be at that time. We now know we have a small WPU increase. We've added some of our awards that we don't know about until later in the year. Generally, we wait, until September, October to add those anyways. So we've went ahead and added those. And overall, we've added about $2.8 million to the budget in the revenue side. We've also gone and adjusted for negotiations with our PESP, which is our support groups. We've made a couple adjustments to capital project funds that have been changing, and building reserve funds. We've removed the roofing projects from Dixon and Wasatch based on determining what we will be doing with them in the near future. And then we've just had some other minor expense changes, mostly based on COVID and the need for some extra staffing, et cetera, in the capital area. The rest of the budget remains unchanged, so I have included a slide for each fund. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through that tonight since it's already been discussed back in May's meeting. But you can see, this is all funds together. You can see we do have a drawdown of our funds that's planned and is mostly from our capital projects. There are years where we do plan to draw down more than we bring in revenue. This is general fund, which is basically our operating, planned to be in the green in that fund. Capital fund will be drawing down some. That's the beginnings of the Timpview High School rebuild and some of our larger capital needs that need to be taken care of. Debt service fund is pretty straightforward. That's our debt payments on our existing bonds. That is set by that debt rate I spoke to earlier. Student activity funds is our schools funds. Most of this is high schools, the money that they bring in school fees and then they turn around and spend. Food services fund, this is obviously child nutrition. It operates on its own outside of our operating budget. They are slated to draw down a little bit of money this year, which they need to do actually. They're limited in how much they can have in their fund balances. And one positive of COVID was that we got a lot of funding in child nutrition because of all the free and reduced exemptions. So if you're looking for a positive in COVID, there's one. Building reserve fund, this is a fund that's set aside for capital projects, generally large improvements, not maintenance types things. We've moved some money into this building reserve fund, if you remember, last spring in anticipation of needing some money to take care of things at Dixon and Wasatch and Timpview. And this has a planned drawdown. This will likely change as the year goes on and we determine what those projects are really going to be based on bonds that we'll be looking at. And this is a redevelopment fund. This is actually an accounting entry, but we have to include it. It is the amount of tax, local property tax that we forego for redevelopment agency. So when the city comes to the school board and asks for a redevelopment agency tax increment to bring in and stimulate the economy, this is the money that we forego for a few years. And that is that. Any questions from the board? Did I clarify how the tax system works well enough?
I'll ask a couple of questions. So the total cost of our teacher pay increase is, what's the total cost? $5
$5 million.
$5 million. And so but we're asking for a 3.5, and the other 1.5 came from, you said priorities, but is that changing spending, so it's effectively cutting in other areas and putting it in here? Is that correct?
Cutting is probably a strong word, but we have areas where we found that we weren't spending as much money as we had budgeted. Frankly, supplies was one of them.
Okay.
So we dug into where we had some areas where we had budgeted some money and we weren't necessarily spending it all, and reduced those budgets and shifted it over.
But that means that money isn't available in those areas.
Correct.
Is
So
that-
if now somebody wants to spend that money, you're right, it's gone.
It's not there.
Another thing where we generally see a little bit of money each year is when we have teachers retire. Those teachers are generally 30-year teachers making much more than an entry-level teacher. They're generally replaced by entry-level teachers or teachers with 3 to 5 years of experience, and so that difference in salaries usually gives us a little bit of a chunk of money, and that helped us out this year too to help fund that other $1.5 million.
So this $3.5 million over an operating budget of $167 million.
All right?
So that's about 2.1%
Yep.
increase.
Yep.
And last year's inflation rate, do you know what that was?
You know, off the top of my head, I think it was 3 something.
So we're not quite meeting
Right.
inflation. Is there a mechanism where our balance just increases with inflation, or do we always have to ask for it?
You always have to ask for it.
Do we ask every year?
No, you do not.
And if we don't ask, where does that money come from?
Generally, if you don't ask, we have to just make the budgets work. It depends on if
So we just absorb inflation?
we absorb it. I mean, you
So
know,
it's-
it also depends on state funding, obviously, you know that as well as anyone, McKay, but yeah, we have to absorb what we can't afford or make things work. And
So we didn't do truth in taxation last year, so we absorbed inflation.
Correct.
In other words, there's a natural system for us to tighten our belt all the time. Is
Yep.
that right?
Yes. Yep, and that
And-
was in the graph where where I laid out the 3 rates. You could see that. For several years, we didn't do tax increases at all. As some of you know, you were board members, and in 2016, we did one and we had to make up some room. We had to make up some of that inflation. And fortunately, you as a board have now committed to trying to at least capture some of that inflation every 2 years.
And that makes up so that we can just, we're not, with our teacher salary, are we passing anybody, even in our neighbors?
Passing, no. Jason might answer. I know we are not passing Alpine. We will never pass Alpine. We'll never catch up to Alpine.
So we're still conservative.
We're
It is
still-
a nice word to say about
Yeah,
what
we're
we're
still
doing.
behind. If you compare a couple other districts, Ogden and Tooele are very similar in size and structure as we are because they're one city districts and they're about the same size of enrollment. We are still quite a ways behind them. I believe their starting salaries are $50,000.
But this does represent sort of a good faith effort. that
Absolutely.
Our teachers will
Yep.
stay on the team a little
Yep.
bit.
Yep.
There's
And-
advantages in living in Provo with BYU and UVU and our nice lifestyle, I guess, that we celebrate.
Something
right?
came from here, right? And I do want to thank you all as board members for supporting the work that's being done. Jason and I and company, along with the PEA and the meetings that we've been having, and it's been a lot of work and a lot of discussions, and for the most part, it's been pretty good, but there were days, Bailey saw me get kind of mad one day, but it's all good. So thank you for your support in this. I know you've gotten a lot of emails from teachers saying thank you, and it's going to help. It can't not help our retention and help attraction. So
I do have a question about the budget.
Mm-hmm.
So removing the re-roofing projects, that was news to me. Maybe I wasn't paying attention before, but so just wondering what the plan was with that and what the capital projects that are carrying over from fiscal year 20 that are moving on to 21.
Yeah, so every year when we get to the end of the year, there's always projects that Mark has in a physical year that don't quite get completed, possibly not started for various reasons, whether it's his resources internally or we can't get bids. We had one year we couldn't get bids on hardly anything. So we'll shift those. That's pretty normal. The roofing projects, and Mark, let me speak up if I speak incorrectly on this. The roofing projects Mark has kind of put on hold because we've had some rumors of what are we going to do as far as going ahead and rebuilding those schools. He's a little hesitant to dump millions of dollars into those schools if we feel like maybe we're going to rebuild them in the very near future. So I don't know that you've fully canceled those or if you've more or less postponed those. Postpone was the answer, so.
But they're not in the budget for this next year.
Correct,
then.
we pulled them out of the capital budget. Correct.
Okay, so.
Which will free up some money for some of the other things that are going to have to be done, possibly. Frankly, we did receive the CARES money, which is helping a lot with a lot of our COVID expenses. Mark is going to have a lot of extra expenses with COVID that we're going to have to cover. I have no way of even beginning to know what those are going to be, how long it'll last. He's obviously extra people, a lot of supplies, et cetera. So it'll free up some of that money as well. We need it.
Stephanie, maybe I can help here, see if I'm wrong here. With those two things, it's not that they're less priority or we've seen that they don't really need to be done. It's that there's an election coming up in November and resolution is going to determine another part. And so we want to stand on a little bit firmer ground as far as the timing of those things, not that they're going to happen. Is that correct, Mark?
But if we decided that those projects still need to happen this fiscal year, we would just need to amend the budget, but there would still be possibility of that.
Yep, we'll just bring it back to the board to have a budget change done. Yep. Okay, if nobody has any further questions on the budget hearing, the tax process, I will leave the mic and let it turn over to public input.
Any additional questions? Okay, we have arrived at the point in this public hearing where we will take public input. If there is anyone who wishes to address the board, there are forms over here to my right, your left. If you would fill one out and then take it over to Bonnie, our secretary. It's right over here. I will wait just a minute so that we can get those filled out. Just a reminder that as you make your comment, the board will take no official action in response to public comment during this meeting. But if there's additional follow-up that is needed, the superintendent or members of the board will be happy to respond later. Those of you who have filled those, if you'll just bring those directly to me, that would be wonderful. Bonnie, I'll get it over to you after. Thank you. If you'll bring that right to me, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. We would first like to hear from Bailey Danielson. I got it right. 4 a.m. was the charm.
My name is Bailey Danielson. I live at 24 East 400 North, and I am a parent of a child at Franklin Elementary, and I am also a teacher at Franklin. And I live in the Provo Peaks boundaries, so I understand that my taxes would also be going up with this. I want to take a second to say thank you to the board, because I have personally sat on the negotiations committee since 2014, and I have seen our salaries in comparison to other districts every single year since that point. It should be noted that in our negotiated agreement, it was shown that this actually represents a 10% to 11% increase for every single teacher, which sounds so vast, and it is. We still are catching up to districts around us, but we are extremely grateful for this huge leap towards being able to be a district that is able to retain our teachers, that are quality educators, and to be able to show them that appreciation that we have. Because I feel appreciated by the community in Provo. I feel appreciated by the fact that I have had so many opportunities in Provo. And now I feel appreciated even more so by being able to have a salary that is comparable to other districts. So I just wanted to say thank you so much for making this a priority this year.
Thank you, Bailey. We will next be pleased to hear from Clay DeGraff.
Spoke at the last meeting talking about teachers not doing their part because, so when I see that you're asking for a increase, however, we're only going to school 2 days physically, I kind of hit the roof. Now, another sneaky thing, I have a warehouse that's worth some money, and $316,000 what you put for a commercial property. I don't know of any commercial property that are $316,000. It would have to be, I bet the median on that, okay? So I pay $5,800 a year in taxes on that. And it just keeps going up. And it just gets tighter on me and tighter on everybody who does business, let alone my residential or property. And so I don't know. Doesn't it seem ironic that the teachers are only going to teach 2 days out of the week in class, but they're going to get a raise? That to me it's ludicrous. Because I don't know of any business right now that has, and I know a lot of businesses that have employees that are getting a raise right now. Most of them are status quo because most of them are pulling back the reins and watching what's coming down the pipeline. But this school has the audacity to say, oh, we're going to give you a raise. You're only going to be in the class 2 days out of the week. So I'm floored, to be honest with you, that this would come up now. Last year, everything was humming, right? Everything was great. But we also tried to have a $245 million bond that failed. And why did it fail? Because it's a $245 million bond. But you're trying to give the teachers a raise. And I'm not trying to, there are many great teachers. But those many great teachers are only going to be in the classroom 2 days out of the week. So I have a huge issue with that. And I have a huge issue with the amount of money that's going to that. And I noticed that I don't know what's going on with the Timpview thing right now, because I know that there's some structural thing, and we haven't been kept in the loop very closely on that. But normally, normally we know what's going on. But I just want to voice my discontent in the fact that you're trying to give a raise when everybody else in the business sector is not. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Clay. Next, we would like to hear from James Paxman.
kind of along the same lines. It'd only be the public sector that would be willing to give a raise in a year such as this. Everybody I know that works in the private sector, there's not raises, there's not increases. If I'm doing the math correctly, we're given a 70 million to 75 million, which is about a 7% plus raise to teachers. I don't think this is the year to do that. Looking at our taxes, and I understand, the levy changes, the valuation goes up, the levy goes down, and so somewhere someone's taxes are going down. It's explained that way every year. So I looked at a variety of properties in Provo, and all of them averaged a 10% increase this year. Looking at the past few years, it's averaged over a 10% increase. We talk about this one bucket this year that we're going to raise, but in the previous year, it was a different bucket that affected the schools and a different bucket. And so I've talked to individuals that their property taxes have actually doubled in 4 years. And so I don't think we can just keep doing that. It's too easy with the click of a mouse to raise our taxes. It's so easy to do that in the public sector. In the private sector, we can't do that. We have to be able to pay for it. We can't just make up money from people that can't afford it. And another thing that I've also talked to is I've talked to some people that have recently graduated that are actually looking for teaching jobs. And they haven't been able to find them. And I know they'd be willing to work for the previous salaries that were starting salaries in our school district. So I don't think it's absolutely mandatory that we have to raise those by $5,000 in order to find teachers. I think there's people out there right now willing to do the job. So that's what I'd have to say on this. Please be cognitive on this increase. It's yet another 10% increase. It's been 10% every year for the last few years. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We next would like to hear from Randy Russin.
Thank you for this opportunity to address the board here. I have a degree in finance from BYU, and I've spent many, many years looking at financial statements. And anytime there's a shortfall in revenue or there's a shortfall in the budget, the first thing that we do is we start going through the budget with a fine-tooth comb. And it's amazing what can be found when that is done. I would imagine, I would venture to guess, and perhaps I could ask you this question: has someone actually gone through the budget with a very fine-tooth comb looking for ways to cut unnecessary expenses? Okay, so has that been done by? Okay, because again, my point is, it's easy to just throw new money at shortfalls. But if an organization is really serious about wanting to increase revenue and help the revenue picture, looking at line item by line item, not just a general overview of the budget, but line item by line item, and having departments go through and look at those budgets, look at those numbers, I would venture to guess there's a lot more money there that could be found. And then by doing that, we don't have to raise taxes on the general public. And I agree with what the other people have said, that these are tough times for the private sector. And so again, I just think that going through the budget with a fine-tooth comb and having that be the goal, to look for any additional revenue that could be there is really paramount. And then the other point that I just wanted to make was, and the other fellow mentioned this, that property values have been going up, year by year, and so right there is additional revenue for the district. And so with property values climbing year by year, there's the tax increase right there, So again, I don't really see the need for any additional tax increase, and would hope you would consider what I've shared here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Russin. We would now like to hear from Annie Groh.
Hello again. I am in full support of raising teachers' salaries. I haven't always been a conscientious voter, I will admit, but in recent years, I've tried to be more conscientious and always vote for tax increases that support public ed and particularly teachers' salaries. And it's unfortunate that the proposed increase is happening right now because according to what Bailey said, it sounds like it's extremely difficult to get a tax increase, especially for teachers' salaries. So that is unfortunate, but it's also unfortunate and hard to justify a raise in salaries when the time of in-class instruction per student is so greatly diminished, as much as 70% compared to a regular school year, and also compared to the neighboring school district teachers, which are getting paid more, like Bailey said, but they are also, at least at this point, saying that they're going to be teaching 5 days a week with 1 hour shortened a day. We need and want good teachers, and we should have a competitive salary. And we can't have schools without teachers, but the reason we have schools is for the children, to make sure every child has a right to education, regardless of their financial and home situation. And if we aren't going to get kids back into school 5 days a week, and the hybrid plan is here to stay, then I would argue for a proportionate tax return, a proportionate return on our taxes in order to help pay for the necessary accommodations many parents are going to be forced to make in order to assist in their children's online learning. Such as these funds could be used to make up for the cost of tutors, private school tuition, childcare, or a portion of income parents might need to sacrifice in order to stay home with their kids to help babysit, and not that teachers are to babysit, but to take care of their children and to educate them. Using this online education. According to this survey that you guys put out in June, 91% of elementary ed school teachers said that children fared worse doing the online program. At the very least, parents should be adequately informed about the financial assistance that is available outside of the public school system if we are going to put so much pressure on them to pick up to educate at home. My Tech High is a homeschool program that offers as much as $1,400 per homeschool child. Harmony is another program. My family greatly benefits from the Carson Smith Scholarship. And I think every parent should be aware of this, especially those with an IEP, that have students with an IEP. My one last plea, it's very unfortunate that children under the age of 12 that are the lowest demographic of risk for coronavirus are also the highest to suffer from education taking place outside of the classroom. This isn't fair, it isn't right, it's not what any of us planned.
Thank you for your comments this evening. I have not received any additional forms for individuals wishing to address the board, so I will close the public comment and we will move on. Item E on our agenda. Is there a motion to adopt Resolution 002-2020, the proposed tax increase?
I move that we adopt Board Resolution 002-2020, property tax increase.
Motion by Board Member Partridge. Is there a second?
Yeah, I second it.
Second by,
Board Member Bryson.
you know, it's a long day. Board Member Bryson. I was just going to say Board Member Nate. Is there any further discussion on the motion?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nate.
Okay, I have some comments on this because we've been receiving a lot of emails and from the public, and rightly so, because this is a serious issue. We're raising the public's taxes, and they have a right to demand and question what we are doing because it's your money, and we're taking your money with threat of force to pay teachers, to pay for the schools, and we are doing that, and we need to justify what we are doing. And I agree with that sentiment 100%. I think we've been called fools. I think we were called fools today, right? We got an email, someone called us a fool. I've been called an idiot, a bunch of things because we're raising taxes. And a lot of people say, hey, you don't know anything about business, you can raise these taxes, so you're just going to do it, and it's just because you have the authority and you don't know anything about how private finance works or how business works, and you can just take it because you can. And, you know, I kind of understand that argument, but when you really look into it, it is incorrect. You look at what we pay our teachers. First of all, this is and I went through this a couple weeks ago with my board report, but this is a supply and demand issue. That's basic economics. You have teachers that are going to school to become teachers. It's decreased 35% in the last 10 years. You have teachers who leave our school system. 57% of teachers leave after 7 years in Utah. And so that decreases the supply that we have. We have increase of student numbers of 2% per year over the last, as far as the eye can see. So increased need for teachers. And that leaves a huge gap. And we see, sorry, this mask is so annoying. We see as a result of that, the prices are going up. That's just what happens when you're faced with those economic pressures. In the last 10 years, salaries have gone up 33% for Utah teachers. And it's not enough. It is a race between every district to pay their teachers enough and to be competitive. And right now, in Provo, we are not competitive. We pay our teachers $190,000 less over their careers than teachers in Nebo. We pay our teachers $560,000 less over their careers than a teacher in Alpine School District. And you want to know what? When you have those type of salary deficiencies, it makes it really hard to hire teachers. And that is a problem, and we lose teachers because of that. I'm very thankful to all the teachers who've stayed, but we lose teachers because of that. And as a result, we have to look at pay increases. And people say, oh, well, your schools are not efficient. I mean, look at the cost of private schools. I did this analysis a little while ago. The average cost for a private school is about $11,000 per student. We educate our kids in our district for about $9,222. I think that's what it was last year. And so a private industry, a private company is $2,000 less efficient than we are. And we have a lot more requirements than they do. We have to provide busing. We have to provide food. We have to provide special services for special needs students. We have to take care of students who have English as a second language. We have a whole host of requirements that a private school would not have to deal with, and which would invariably raise their prices and raise their costs. And so people say, okay, this is not a good time. Well, we have fallen too far behind. The teachers were very generous with us last year not to press this issue because they knew we had a bond issue that was important, and I appreciate that. I am very in favor of this, and you know what? We are still going to be behind the 8 ball after this is over. We're still going to have to look at salary increases, and we're going to have to comb through all of our finances because we can't be the highest tax district in the state. We're going to have to really look at what we spend our money on. But I feel like this at least was a first step. So, sorry, I got on my soapbox. That's it.
Thank you, Board Member Bryson. Board Member Partridge.
Yeah, I just wanted to share my thoughts on this. I'm grateful for our teachers. I come from a family with some educators, and I've seen as a parent and now as a board member just how hard our teachers work. They work hard. They work many hours outside of their contracted time. Even with our hybrid schedule right now, they're going to be working their full contracted time. They're teaching kids 4 days a week, plus all of the preparation. It takes a lot of preparation to put the online learning on as well. And that's going to be a temporary thing. We're not going to be in that hybrid model forever. But for me, and from a lot of the emails I've received as well, I think it comes down to what do we value? And I value our teachers, and I recognize that they work very hard, and the money that they receive does not meet the level of the work that they put in and the love and the care. They genuinely care for these kids, and I'm sure many of them lose sleep and stress over these kids. And And so I appreciate our teachers, and I recognize that we are still not where we should be as with our salaries, but I feel that we need to take a step in the right direction. It was interesting, I'm sure many of you saw what I saw on social media. The end of March, beginning of April, there were a lot of memes that were like, please, teachers, whatever you need in the fall, make that school supply list as long as you need to, and I will do anything if you take my kids back, right? We all appreciate all the work that our teachers are doing, and I know that Provo values our teachers, and feel that this is a good step to show them that we value them.
Thank you. Any additional input from the board? Board Member Jensen?
Yeah, I think it's, I just want to reemphasize what we're asking our teachers. We're not asking them to teach 2 days a week. We're asking them to teach. Be teachers. It's a mission. I understand that. I want to read you something from Medium. This is someone in Nevada, but this is my experience. I'm the president of the Utah School Boards Association. I visit every district in the state. And this person says, in every single board meeting, planning meeting, and staff meeting I've attended in multiple districts this July, the administration concedes that they will end up having to default to remote only. What Provo is doing is we don't want to. We're doing everything so that all the concerns about not being in the classroom don't just happen without us announcing it. But what this person says that every single board meeting, planning meeting, staff meeting in multiple districts, the administration concedes that's what's going to happen. And they're not telling their parents. That's what they're thinking. We have specific demographics in our district that is really, really hard. They can't do it again. If we can fight and give our teachers just a little bit of skill to say transmission won't happen in our schools, if we can ask our community, you really need to wear your mask because the fire has to go out in the community, not just in the schools, it has to go out. And that means, yep, I don't get to see my mother that has Alzheimer's. I haven't seen her since March. She will never remember my name, ever. My community infection has to go down so kids can go to school. There's going to be sacrifices outside of school. And we're going to fight to get our kids in school every day. We're going to fight that if suddenly, you know what usually happens at this time of year when we're approving a school calendar? We have protests and emails. Why are you so stupid that you're starting school so early? What's wrong with you? That's not this year. People want us in school. People have protests. Why is break so short? You need people to understand. It's been made clear. We're grateful for that. If we're essential to the community to stop so much abuse, hunger, all these things, we just have to keep up with inflation. And beyond, and if we can keep up with inflation, we'll move around money to find better, we'll do things more efficiently to find money for teachers, if we can keep up with inflation. And regardless of that increase in valuation, I know that hurts everybody that comes and it hurts me, but the math says somewhere in Provo, there was a piece of property that lost value. And they didn't have to pay as much as last year. I know that because by statute, we don't get a dime more when your property goes up, unless we ask for it. We don't get a dime more in inflation. In other words, the law says you should find 2 to 3% to cut every year. And we'll make it hard to ask, and that's what we're doing. We don't ask every year. We're asking our teachers to do a lot this year because it will be a battle to get our kids in. This is what we're trying to do, is to take care of our kids this year. We're trying to get them 100% in school, every day, every kid, full-time. But we can't just decide that will happen. We have to make it happen. And that means taking care of our teachers and then making it happen. Because if we're just prisoner to events, we haven't been batting very high on the average this year for good things happening. We have to make good things happen, and that's why I'm in favor of this increase.
Thank you, Board Member Jensen. Anyone else on the board with a comment? Board Member Rash?
I want to say something just kind of briefly. You know, I've been on the board for several years now, and every single year, we work with the teachers with these really difficult questions. And since I've been here, one of you guys might correct me if you need to, but since I've been here, every year there's some level of the teacher saying, okay, we'll wait. And they step back and they say, okay, we'll wait. Okay, we'll wait. Okay, we'll wait. And so when we talk about why now, you know what? This isn't easy for anybody. We're in a situation now that nobody predicted. We couldn't have predicted this. This isn't a big money grab from our teachers. It's not. Every single year, the teachers say, you know what? Yeah, things are hard. We're going to step back. We're going to step. And every year, they take the hit. They take the hit. And that's how we've gotten so much lower than the other districts. That's why Provo just is not doing what other districts in the state are doing. Every single time I walk into a school, and this has happened all year, a teacher would stop me in the hallway and say, you know what, I can go over here, and this is what I'll be getting. I'll go over here. I had a guy tell me at one of our middle schools, he has a friend that wanted to come. He wanted to come from Provo. You know what, Alpine's going to pay him $20,000 more. Literally, that's the numbers we're talking about for our teachers. And I think this isn't easy for any of us. We're all taxpayers in Provo. We have kids in the schools too. We all want our kids back in school. I have a teenage boy that I had to go tell him that we aren't going to be in school every day. That was not an easy conversation. We all want our kids back in school. This isn't ideal for anybody. It's just not. And so I think the message I want to leave with is that kind of Rebecca mentioned the process. This is something we've worked on, not just this year, not just the last couple months, years. We've built for years to this point. And I just think that it's time. It's time for the teachers not to have to say, okay, we'll step back and capture some of that inflation that we have lost over the years. So I'm in favor of this as well, recognizing that it's hard, recognizing that we've got people that taxes aren't fun for anybody. Nobody wants to pay taxes, but we also want good schools, and we want good teachers in the classroom, and that's what I'm voting for tonight.
Thank you, Board Member Rash. Any other board members? Yes, Board Member Nielsen.
I just want to comment as well. So I am a teacher myself. I am not a teacher in the Provo School District. I teach privately, but I just want to make a quick comment on what teachers are asked to do these days versus what they were asked even to do 10 years ago. I've been teaching this will be my 11th year, and teachers are asked more and more and more to be social workers and to be psychologists and to take on parenting roles that children aren't getting at home. And we are seeing quite a different student in classrooms these days than we've ever seen. I've seen it over my last 11 years. And now we're even asking them to fulfill all their contract days, to be in the classroom like normal, but teach in person and online. And to expect teachers to do all of that and then to pay them so much less than our neighboring districts is to expect low-quality education and expect for teachers to not stay. And that's not the teacher's fault. That's a product of supply and demand. So I too am in favor. We need to value our teachers, like Jennifer said, and I value the teachers. And by valuing the teachers, we in turn value our students as well.
Thank you, Board Member Nielsen. Board Member Hall?
I just want to agree with most everybody said up here. I'm also a business owner and also, obviously own a home in Provo. So I'm going to feel the impact as well, but I'm also hearing all the time that we're not getting the best to come to Provo. And I want the best for our kids here and have that option. So I'm in favor of this.
Thank you. I'm the only one that hasn't commented. I'll make my comment brief. I have been involved in education for 40 years, 35 years as a classroom teacher, either in the public schools or at the university level. Over that 35 years of experience that I have in the Utah system, 7 of those years, I received no salary increase. And I continued to work because I was committed to my students. And it didn't go without an impact, an adverse impact on my family, because expenses continued to go up. My costs never decreased. My taxes went up, and I faced a whole host of other economic impacts. And so as I have approached this, I have personal experience in what our teachers have been experiencing the last few years. And from the bottom of my heart, I can empathize with and express my gratitude for the willingness of our district faculty to work with us and to be patient and to be understanding. I realize the impact of taxes. And like anyone else, I don't get excited about taxes going up. But more importantly to me, I feel that it is a privilege to be able to make even a small sacrifice from my personal budget and personal life, because I see that benefit come back hundreds and hundreds of times over in the lives of the children who are benefited by having competent, qualified, talented teachers in the classroom who are willing to go the extra mile in many cases to see that their responsibilities are fulfilled. And I am more than happy to be able to advocate for this modest increase for our teachers. We have a motion and a second. Is there any additional discussion? If not, all those who are in favor of Resolution 002-2020 proposed tax increase indicate with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with nay? The resolution passes. Item F, approval of the fiscal year 21 budget and tax increase. Is there a motion to approve?
I move that we approve the fiscal year 21 budget and the board local tax rate increase for teacher salaries.
Motion by Board Member Hall. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Board Member Nielsen. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Seeing none. All in favor of approving fiscal year 21 budget and the tax increase indicate with aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed with nay? The motion passes unanimously. I would again like to express my appreciation for all who have addressed the board. I realize that there are many who will perhaps be unhappy with the action that we have taken this evening. However, I feel that it is the right course of action. I feel that it is the course of action that will allow us to continue to strengthen the Provo City School District and to provide a quality education for all of the students who will be served within the district. Is there a motion to adjourn the public meeting?
So moved.
Motion by Board Member Nielsen. We are adjourned.